Day 8. Developing self-awareness. One of the greatest misconceptions in personal development is the belief that change begins with action. While action is certainly important, meaningful and lasting change usually begins much earlier. It begins with awareness. Before a person improves their habits, they become aware of them. Before they change a limiting belief, they recognize that it exists. Before they improve a relationship, advance their career, or pursue a meaningful goal, they develop a clearer understanding of themselves. This may sound obvious, yet many people spend years trying to improve their lives without ever taking the time to truly understand the person who is living them. Modern life makes this surprisingly easy. Most people move quickly from one responsibility to another. There is always another task to complete, another notification to check, another problem to solve, or another distraction competing for attention. In such an environment, it is possible to remain busy for years while rarely pausing long enough to examine your own thoughts, emotions, motivations, and behaviors. The result is that many people know far more about the world around them than they know about themselves. They understand the opinions of strangers on social media. They know what is happening in the news. They can discuss the successes and failures of celebrities, politicians, athletes, and business leaders. Yet when asked why they repeatedly make certain decisions, react in certain ways, or struggle with specific challenges, they often find it difficult to provide a clear answer. Self-awareness changes that. At its core, self-awareness is the ability to observe yourself honestly and objectively. It is the willingness to step back from your thoughts and emotions long enough to examine them, rather than automatically obey them. This distinction may seem subtle, but it is incredibly important. Most people spend their lives immersed in their thoughts. They experience an emotion and immediately react to it. They have a belief and assume it must be true. They feel fear and conclude that the situation must be dangerous. They feel doubt and assume they are incapable. A self-aware person approaches these experiences differently. Instead of immediately identifying with every thought or emotion, they learn to observe them with curiosity. They ask questions. Why am I reacting this way? Why does this situation make me uncomfortable? What belief might be influencing my response? What am I afraid of losing? What am I hoping to gain? These questions create space between the experience and the reaction. Within that space lies the possibility of choice. Without awareness, behavior tends to be automatic. With awareness, behavior becomes intentional. Consider how often emotions influence decisions. Perhaps someone receives critical feedback at work and immediately becomes defensive. Another person experiences rejection and withdraws from future opportunities. Someone else feels overwhelmed by a difficult challenge and decides to give up before making a genuine attempt. In each case, the emotional reaction feels completely justified in the moment. Yet if the individual later reflects on the situation, they may realize that their response was driven less by reality and more by their interpretation of reality. This is one of the reasons self-awareness is so valuable. It helps us distinguish between what is happening and what we believe is happening. The difference can be significant. A comment that feels like an attack may simply be feedback. A setback that feels permanent may actually be temporary. A fear that feels like a warning may simply be discomfort associated with growth. Without awareness, these distinctions are easy to miss. Another important aspect of self-awareness involves recognizing recurring themes in your life. Most people have patterns that appear repeatedly across different situations. A person who struggles with confidence in relationships may also struggle with confidence at work. Someone who avoids conflict in one area of life often avoids it in others. A person who constantly seeks approval may find themselves making decisions based on the expectations of others rather than their own values. At first, these patterns can seem unrelated. However, when viewed through the lens of self-awareness, they often reveal a deeper connection. What appears to be several separate problems may actually stem from a single underlying belief, fear, or habit. This is why self-awareness is so often described as the foundation of personal growth. Without it, we spend our time treating symptoms while ignoring causes. We attempt to change behaviors without understanding what is driving them. We focus on outcomes without examining the thought processes that produce those outcomes. Eventually, progress becomes frustrating because the same issues continue to reappear. Awareness allows us to address problems at their source. It also helps us recognize strengths that we may have overlooked. When people think about self-reflection, they often focus exclusively on weaknesses. They search for flaws, mistakes, and areas that require improvement. While honest evaluation is important, self-awareness is not about constant self-criticism. In fact, genuine self-awareness requires balance. It involves recognizing your strengths as clearly as your weaknesses. It means understanding what energizes you, what motivates you, and what values matter most to you. It means identifying situations where you perform well and understanding why. It means appreciating your progress rather than focusing exclusively on how far you still have to go. A person who understands both their strengths and limitations is far more effective than someone who is unaware of either. Over time, self-awareness creates a stronger sense of alignment. Decisions become clearer because they are based on genuine values rather than external pressure. Goals become more meaningful because they reflect personal aspirations rather than social expectations. Relationships improve because communication becomes more honest and intentional. Most importantly, self-awareness creates freedom. When you understand yourself more clearly, you become less controlled by unconscious habits, fears, and assumptions. You stop reacting automatically to every situation and begin responding deliberately. You become the author of your choices rather than a passive participant in old patterns. This process does not happen overnight. Developing self-awareness is a lifelong practice. The more you observe yourself honestly, the more you learn. The more you learn, the better equipped you become to create meaningful change. As you continue this journey, remember that self-awareness is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming conscious, because once something becomes conscious, it can be understood. And once it is understood, it can be changed. Reflection questions. 1. What emotions tend to influence your decisions most strongly? 2. Are there recurring patterns that appear in multiple areas of your life? 3. What situations tend to trigger frustration, fear, or self-doubt? 4. What personal strengths do you often overlook? 5. How well do your daily actions align with your values? Daily action step. Set aside 15 minutes this evening for quiet reflection. Review the events of your day and ask yourself what thoughts, emotions, or assumptions influenced your decisions. Write down any patterns you notice without judging them. Approach the exercise with curiosity rather than criticism. The goal is not to change anything today. The goal is simply to see yourself more clearly. Success affirmation. I observe my thoughts, emotions, and behaviors with honesty and curiosity. The more I understand myself, the more intentional and empowered my choices become.